From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. The United States Congress would not support military intervention in Venezuela, according to the House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Chairman. Representative Elliott Abrams made the statement during a hearing on the political situation in Venezuela. Speculation over possible U.S. military intervention began after President Donald Trump said it was an option.
But I do worry about the President's saber-rattling, his hints that the U.S. military intervention remains an option. I want to make clear to our witnesses and to everyone else watching, U.S. military intervention is not an option. Congress decides when, where, and how the U.S. military is used around the world, and Congress would not support military intervention in Venezuela.
Elliott Abrams, the U.S. Special Envoy to Venezuela, has asked other countries to assist the United States intervention efforts in Venezuela. Abrams is a former diplomat who advocates U.S. intervention around the world. He is particularly famous for his role in the Iran-Contra affair and supporting genocide in Central America. He has also been linked with the failed 2002 coup against Comandante Hugo Chavez.
And as we meet today, Mr. Chairman, the State Department and its interagency partners are hard at work responding to Interim President Guaido's call for international humanitarian assistance. We invite international partners to join us in helping to fill warehouses and assistance centers.
Activists from the Code Pink social justice movement interrupted Abrams while he was speaking in the House. They said that the Special Envoy to Venezuela is a war criminal. The activists pointed to Abrams' long history of interventionism and the tragic consequences of his actions. During the hearing, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar clashed with the Special Envoy to Venezuela over the U.S. military's role in Central and South America in the 1980s. Omar questioned Abrams' integrity in the wake of the Iran-Contra affair when he withheld information from Congress.
Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump welcomed his Colombian counterpart Iván Duque to the White House. Duque's right-wing administration has been loyal to the U.S. since he took power in April 2018. When speaking to the press, Trump contradicted the House Representative for Foreign Affairs' earlier statements, reiterating the threat of direct military intervention in Venezuela. Meanwhile, President Duque confirmed his government's plans to support the U.S. position.
We have a big team of people, very talented.
Duque's visit comes a day after a number of political sectors and social organizations in Colombia demanded that the president refrain from involvement in any type of military intervention in Venezuela. In a 16-page letter addressed to Duque, they outlined the ways in which the government of Colombia has acted in a matter which has serious implications. Signatories rejected the use of Colombian territory by the U.S. military for war operations on their Latin American neighbor. Our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Jorge Stossel, gives us more details of Wednesday's events.
Thank you. President Iván Duque of Colombia met this morning with President Donald Trump here in Washington at the White House. The issue of Venezuela was taking center stage of the press conference they gave after their meeting. President Trump says that military options or interventions in Venezuela, it's on the table, and all the options are on the table. And then he says that he believes that humanitarian aid, as he called it, is going to be distributed, but even though one of the bridges that they were thinking to bring it across the border is with Colombia is being closed, there are many other options. He said that beyond any military intervention, of beyond all the strategy that are following in order to overthrow the government of President Maduro. He has plan B, C, D, E, and he was joking that he has multiple options. On the other hand, President Ivan Duque is here to coordinate the overthrowing of President Maduro. He's going to meet with the people of the OAS on Friday, and also he announces that that group that Colombia is having a very active role called the Grupo de Lima is going to meet against in Colombia, and of course he's going to be leading. Analysts are saying that all that loyalty that has President Trump with Colombia is going to be repaid with the fight, with the failure of fighting President Duque against narco-trafficking and against the proliferation of drugs. Over 200,000 hectares of coca leaf is still on in Colombia, even more than the president before, and seems that the U.S. is going to put like a blind eye on that. He's going to look to the other side, President Trump, in order not to condemn the lack of commitment that Colombia has in that sense. So in conclusion, President Duque came here to implement once more the overthrow of President Maduro, and he actively is meeting with all the voices, among them Elliott Abrams, in order to try to go back to his country and accelerate the pressure, putting more and more pressure against the government of President Maduro. We get back to you.
Thank you, Jorge, for your report. And the U.S. House of Representatives has also voted to end military assistance to the Saudi-led war in Yemen. A similar vote is expected in the Senate soon and could push President Trump into using his first ever veto. Washington's support has been crucial to the Saudi coalition's campaign, especially its air war against the Houthi alliance, which controls much of Yemen. Members of Congress used the Rarely Used War Powers Act to withdraw authorization for U.S. involvement. And during an interview with Al Mayadeen TV, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro said that opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó, who declared himself the interim president of Venezuela last month, will have to answer before the courts for his actions.
This person, who believes that politics is a game and that he can violate the Constitution and the law, sooner or later will have to answer before the courts, before the law. I'm absolutely sure of this.
President Maduro also called on Arab countries to defend Venezuela and accused the United States of inventing a crisis to justify intervention.
I ask for the support of all countries across the world, of the Arab world, the Muslim people. I'm asking for their support. Defending Venezuela is worth it. They can't fabricate that Maduro has weapons of mass destruction, as they did in Iraq. They can't fabricate that there are massacres here, like they did in Libya. So they fabricated a crisis which, with an alleged noble goal, they want to carry out a humanitarian intervention.
During a visit to Bolivia, the former head of the UNASUR bloc, Ernesto Samper, rejected the U.S. government's intervention in Venezuela. He says the opposition has made the wrong decision by supporting violence.
There are two clear paths to overcome this crisis. One is by strength, by war, by confrontation, which is led by the government of the United States, with the regrettable consent of a group of Latin American countries in the Lima Group. And on the other side, there is a consensus that seems to be broad around a negotiation to find a solution, like the Pope says, just and peaceful for the situation in Venezuela.
On Tuesday, huge crowds took to the streets in the state of Táchira in Venezuela to celebrate Youth Day. The celebrations took place near the border with Colombia, where the opposition is vowing to bring in so-called humanitarian aid.
Yet another day of threats at the Venezuelan-Colombian border as the U.S. tries to force so-called humanitarian aid into Venezuela. The Simon Bolivar Bridge is calm as ever. The so-called humanitarian aid has been used as fuel to mobilize supporters of the opposition. Though those marches also took place without incident, a reality which dismantles the corporate media narrative of suppression of opposition events. Chavismo celebrated Youth Day at this anti-imperialist camp on the Tienditas International Bridge, which has now become the epicenter of struggle between war and peace. The Bolivarian militias descended on the Tienditas Bridge as part of the broad resistance against the coup plans.
We Venezuelans are a people of peace. We want our brothers and sisters throughout the world to hear we are an independent and sovereign nation, and we have our militia prepared in order to defend our beloved Venezuelan homeland.
They joined the youth.
Just meters from Colombia, our youth reaffirms their commitment to defend the sovereignty and our independence, which was won by our heroes.
As we have said, beyond the threats by opposition, which they continue to say that today the government is going to fall and that Venezuela is going to burn, from here nothing extraordinary is going to happen. The Venezuela opposition are liars and provocative. They have said that they will topple the government on January 10th, then on the 23rd, then the 12th of February, and come today. Nicolás Maduro continues to be the president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
The opposition says it's now preparing for February 23rd protest. Meanwhile, the permanent vigil on the Tienditas Bridge continues.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Week-long anti-government protests in Haiti have intensified, leaving a number of people dead. The protesters are demanding the resignation of President Jovenel Moïse. Hundreds of them gathered outside the presidential palace. The police set up a barricade to prevent them from gaining access. Shops have been looted and cars set alight. The Caribbean community CARICOM is expressing deep concern about the situation in Haiti. CARICOM is calling for calm and an end to ongoing violence, appealing for all involved to engage in dialogue and respect the Constitution. The regional bloc says this will allow the situation to be resolved peacefully.
Primary responsibility for economic policy.
Thousands took to the streets of Buenos Aires, Argentina, to demand an end to the government's austerity measures. Social movements say these measures have greatly hurt the most vulnerable in society and will only continue to damage the country's economy.
The sound of drums reverberates throughout the city. This mass demonstration reached downtown Buenos Aires, where social movements demanded that Mauricio Macri's government provide them with bread, work and dignity. They also want the president to put an end to austerity measures that have greatly impacted the poor.
We don't want neoliberalism to leave us in misery, for it to condemn countless families into hunger. We are here to call out the failure of this government's economic policies.
While the government and media corporations take aim at marches, workers demand social programs and a food emergency law to support soup kitchens. On top of this, they ask that mass layoffs be stopped for good.
There is widespread hunger in Argentina. Many kids are not able to eat more than once a day. Our government looks to the other side and will only talk about Venezuela. There are so many issues that need to be resolved here. We need politicians to help those in need.
Protesters outrightly rejected the government's economic measures, calling them repressive. They're accusing the government of bowing to the demands of the International Monetary Fund.
This is not about them being unable to help. It's about two different points of view. These economic policies favor certain groups. They favor one single social class. Poverty, unemployment, they are a direct consequence of the government's policies that are working to please the International Monetary Fund.
Argentina's opposition wants the government to pay the ultimate political price for the measures that are hurting those who have the least. Social movements will continue to mobilize as inflation and unemployment continues to rise.
A Sudanese refugee held in one of Australia's offshore migrant detention sites for 6 years has been awarded a human rights prize. Abdul Aziz Muhammad was awarded the world's most prestigious Martin Ennals Award for his extraordinary tenacity and courage in protesting the Australian government's inhumane practices for years. Canberra has been sending asylum seekers trying to enter the country by boat to Manus Island or Nauru in the Pacific for processing. Those found to be refugees are barred from resettling in Australia.
6 months later,
this is, I think, significant. It's the first time in the history of the award that it has been conferred upon someone who is advocating in relation to rights violations perpetrated by a Western liberal democracy.
But all I can say, it is inhumane condition and it's so cruel. And no one deserves to be in such a places. Until today, there are about 1,000 men there who are desperately need an humanitarian evacuation from the islands.
Following violent clashes which claimed 2 lives, the Senegalese president Macky Sall has called on young people to campaign peacefully ahead of presidential elections in the country. Speaking at a rally in Kaolack, Sall urged supporters of all parties not to fight each other. Dozens have been arrested due to violence that erupted on Monday. Elections are planned for February 24th.
I told the youth in my camp that no one is taking part in acts of violence, and I asked young people who are not from our camp not to be violent because we are a family.
South Africa's union federation COSATU has mobilized workers to march against high unemployment and an economy, which they say disadvantages workers and those who are yet to enter the job market. Our correspondent Matuba Malachi was at the march in Johannesburg.
Workers affiliated to trade union COSATU heeded the call to action against joblessness and ill treatment of workers by corporates. COSATU affiliates range from retail, textile and public servants, among others.
We have to destroy the system of capitalism, which is the system of wage labor. That is the foundation of exploitation of workers. They must come to a system of socialism, the system that guarantees the well-being of everybody, the system that guarantees work, that respects labor.
We are sick and tired problems about policies that are not benefiting the working class and the people.
The march finally got to a stand after several hours of waiting. This is certainly not the biggest turnout COSATU has ever managed in its history, but this is certainly a message to send to the government to say more jobs.
The Federation is a shadow of its former self, and irreconcilable differences among members caused the disintegration. However, the organization mobilized enough support to bring Johannesburg CBD to a standstill. This was a nationwide strike, and all of the country's 9 provinces were painted red by COSATU affiliates. But here in Johannesburg, a list of concerns to both government and the private sector were highlighted in a demonstration outside the provincial legislature and a chamber of mines. And there was a punting of a more socialist approach in the place of what's seen as the greedy capitalist system.
The mining sector announcing packages of retrenchments across various sectors of the mines. They've been saying the prices of minerals have been going down. I can tell you that since December, the price of gold and other minerals have been going up. They've been going up and up even today.
Despite COSATU's unhappiness with the ANC's government's handling of state-owned enterprises and no immediate solutions to unemployment, the Federation says it will urge workers to vote for the ANC in the coming elections. Matuba Mahlachi, Telesur, Johannesburg.
The African black leopard has been the stuff of legend and campfire stories for decades. But for the first time in a century, the rare leopard, commonly known as black panther, has been photographed in Kenya. While common in other regions of the world, they are extremely rare on the African savanna. The last time a black panther was captured on camera in Africa was in 1909. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Hundreds of factories in Belgium were closed for the day as the country came to an almost complete shutdown because of a trade union protest. Demonstrators are demanding better employment benefits, early retirement, and better education. On Wednesday, flight operations were reduced, railways and seaports were also affected. The International Court of Justice has ruled that Iran's efforts to recover $2 billion of assets frozen by the U.S. can proceed. Tehran says the U.S. has illegally taken Iranian financial assets. Based in the Netherlands, the ICJ is the United Nations top court, but it has no power to enforce its decisions. The case comes at a tense moment between the two countries as the Trump administration unravels bipartisan agreements. Now let's take a look at some other stories from around the world.
Journalist Maria Ressa has been arrested in the Philippines as President Rodrigo Duterte continues to crack down on critics. Ressa faces charges of cyber libel. Meanwhile, press freedom advocates have branded her arrest as persecution. President Duterte has amassed a number of high-profile critics opposing his anti-drug campaign, which has claimed thousands of lives. At least 12 students have been injured in an explosion at a school in Indian-controlled Kashmir. The cause of the blast was not immediately clear. The Indian part of Kashmir has been plagued by separatist violence for years. Clashes between security forces and militants have killed more than 100 civilians over the past year.
We were in class. Suddenly, we heard a blast. Someone said that it might be a transformer. However, when we went out and saw that it came from a classroom, 5, 6 boys went there. After that, we don't know what happened.
2 Syrian nationals have been arrested in Germany on suspicion of crimes against humanity while they worked for the Syrian intelligence services. The 2 suspects stand accused of torturing opposition activists between 2011 and 2012 when they both left Syria. They were arrested in Berlin. 6 survivors, some of whom live in Germany, testified against one of the 2 detainees.
And before we end the show, as part of an international campaign called Drums for Peace for Venezuela, Telesur has released a song performed by Cuban singer Raúl Torres and featuring a number of musicians from the region. The video is a message against war in Venezuela and the rest of the world. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook and Twitter and on Instagram for Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.